We are a team. As storytellers and dreamers,
There is always magic to discover.
Once upon a time,
a Las Vegas showgirl
and a comedian magician,
figured out that even with different perspectives,
our adventures and experiences together
are really just
one big
caper.
Can you explain what you meant on your coffee club email that I didn't get it, that you hold your own road? You were holding your own road.
Yes. I will explain. I hoed my own road, and hoeing ain't easy, which makes me laugh, but whatever. Here's what I meant. I kind of created a path of my own. It's not just alternative, it's just kind of unprecedented, the way I have lived my life. And I don't know if that is the rebel in me, if it was punk rock, if it was survival and just going where the wind blew. I bring all those up because I'm sure that they played a role. Like those elements of my personality kind of influenced my decisions. And my decisions were not always the right decisions. I did not graduate high school.
Wait, what?
I did not graduate high school. I was asked very politely to move on with my life.
Politely?
Well, yeah, the second time. The first time was not. So I got in a lot of trouble, and it was kind of the pastor's daughter routine, in that my father was in law enforcement, and I was rebellious and punk rock, and made a lot of decisions that were not good decisions, but they were in defiance of what my father was about. I don't have any regrets, but I suppose if I were to identify a regret, that would be one of them. Just because of what it did to my relationship with my dad, and I accept absolute fault. Nevertheless, on leaving high school, I was presented with an opportunity that inflated my ego a little bit, and it was an enjoyable experience. Essentially, I was offered an opportunity to, in exchange for what would be credited as university credits or college credit, I was asked to teach as a guest instructor at an art school, to teach figure studies. And that's kind of fed my ego a little bit. Later on, I ended up actually doing that out of my own art studio. I had a partner in that affair, and not a romantic partner, just like a business partner who was also an artist. And he and I did meet in high school, and we reconnected with one another well after high school, and we ended up running a studio and classes and doing all of those things. So that just kind of happened to me, and it wasn't until sometime later that I made a decision that every job opportunity that I would accept would have to meet certain criteria, namely being arts related. And so that's skipping a lot of years of waiting tables and working at call centers and working retail and doing all kinds of things just to survive. So as a career, as a entrepreneurial entertainer, I had to discover what I was good at and then discover the best way to sell it. And I didn't really have a mentor. There wasn't any formal education in learning how to do that. There weren't even really resources like books about how to do it, but I probably wouldn't have read them anyway because of that little rebel in me. So I kind of created my own way of doing things, and this was all, mind you, pre-internet, so that wasn't a resource
I didn't realize his rebel was so strong.
I think you know.
I don't see it as a rebellion.
Okay. It was an unconventional approach to
Right.
life.
So we did that show, Bunny Brigade.
Mhm.
And while we were doing research for the show, now, I don't know how many burlesque producers, or, okay, I'll just say burlesque producers, actually do research for their theme shows, but we were deep in research. I mean, we contacted some actual bunny girls. Like, there's a whole lot of work we put into that show.
Just a little bit of setup here. We've co-produced a number of shows. That was one of them, certainly the one that we worked the hardest on.
Yes.
And it was a tribute to the women of Playboy magazine, both the bunnies, but also photographers, and certainly the models.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Playmates.
So, out of respect for those people, we certainly did our homework and
Yes.
yeah.
So the reason I bring this up, it is definitely not left out of left field. There was a quote by Hugh Hefner. Life is too short to be living somebody else's dream. And that really stuck with me. Like I was coming out of a time in my life where I had lived according to someone else's dream. And I think that a lot of people, performers or not, are living somebody else's dream. Whether it's they wish they were performers or they wish they were this other thing. I don't know what's better than being a performer. Honestly. But I feel like we are kind of funneled into this system, if you will. And it's all about somebody else's dream. I mean, what is the American dream? And who came up with that? And why is it the thing? And then why someone like Phelyx, decided that's just not for you. And then you chose to hoe your own road rather than take the road more traveled.
I think I identified, going back to those fresh out of high school years, I identified one trait of mine, which is a little hubris, not necessarily academic hubris, but certainly maybe egocentric hubris.
Well, isn't that the definition of hubris?
It is, yeah. Well, I've explored that quite a bit, but
Okay. Sorry.
I recognize a trait of myself about myself that would have made it very difficult for me to go to higher education on a traditional path. It would have been, I would be setting myself up for a failure, or something that I would consider to be a failure, if I had gone with the conventional postgraduate path.
This is really making a lot of sense now of some of the things even that we talk about today. Huh. All right, this is enlightening.
Revelations, you've heard it here, is breaking news.
Breaking news. Holy.
Yeah.
Okay, I totally get that, because I was also not one that wanted to go the traditional path. Of course, I became a professional dancer at the age of, I was not yet 18 yet, so I was 17 when I was paid for my first dancing gig with Colorado Ballet. So, and that was a treat, to my first time I ever got to perform a Balanchine ballet. So, never again.
Never again. Crossed off the list. Done.
Done. No offense to anyone who is a huge fan of Balanchine or the style or the. It just was not good for my body. I started to develop in 6 weeks. Tendinitis and no bueno. So I chose to move on from that and go join another ballet company, which was not Balanchine, not Russian, just pretty contemporary kind of ballet company. Not as contemporary as Wonderbound at all, like not even close. I only wish we only didn't ever have to wear pointe shoes. I probably would have gone further.
Wonderbound is a ballet-centric contemporary dance company that I have experience working with, producing and performing in a show. I don't dance.
No, I'm just kidding. You dance. He dances, and one day I'm going to catch him on camera. Yeah. Yeah, he does dance. We do, actually. We move a lot in this family. Did lots of stuff. But I didn't, when I was growing up, it was expected that I would be a lawyer or a doctor. Engineer wasn't even on the table because at the time, the world was not looking at engineers, whether they were software or mechanical or...
My dad, right before that.
Yes, it was right before that.
Yeah.
And my dad was a civil engineer, and he actually retired early, sadly, because of discrimination in the workplace.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So he just like, okay, I'm out. He, bowed out. And so engineering wasn't one of the big things. It was doctor, lawyer. And so I tried my best in school, and I actually did pretty well. I always had at least a 3.5. It was expected to have a 4.0 and dance, 30 plus hours a week. I don't know how I did it, but I did. But then, at 14, I was like, no, this is the path I want to take. I want to be a professional ballerina. And when I was a ballerina, I was exhausted physically and mentally. It was just a hard time. I didn't think to go to school. Like, it wasn't a thing. It wasn't like I knew someday eventually I would have to have a backup plan, because dancers don't dance forever. You can get injured immediately, like within the first 6 months, and then you're kind of in trouble. So I was like, okay, I'll get there. I'm only 20. I don't need to deal. I don't know. I didn't have to think about it. But then I got into the show and was shocked at how many girls, well, it wasn't just the girls, how many of the performers were going to school full time in addition to performing full time. And I was like, wow, they're getting full on degrees and getting paid really well to do what they love, what they train their whole life for. And then when they're done, they retire and then they go on to their next career. Like, I was like, wow, this is cool. So I kind of followed someone else's dream. But I also chose art. Like, I was like, oh, no, maybe I should go with art. So I went to an art school and got an associate's. I was definitely not going to spend another, whatever, $40,000 or $80,000, I don't know, whatever, to go to this art school that still isn't accredited 20 years later.
In retrospect, a wise choice.
Yes. And my juicy bit, for this episode, I'll share.
This episode's juicy bit. Not sponsored yet.
Not sponsored yet. So I was performing full time as a Las Vegas showgirl, or at the time I was already a principal dancer. I was one of the lead dancers in the show. There were 4 of us, 4 women and 3 men, 3 or 4 men. I can't remember. There was 4. Okay. And I had graduated with my associates from the school, and I was like, well, I guess I could start looking for a job. I already have a job, but maybe I'll start as an intern or something. And my boyfriend at the time was a sushi chef, and he is a very social person and made friends with everyone who came to sit at his sushi bar. And it just so happened that the sushi bar he worked at was very close to an ad agency, a big agency in Las Vegas. And a lot of the people would go there and have sushi. So one of them happened to be a junior art director at the agency. And she was like, why don't you give me her resume? I'll pass it along. They're hiring right now. And so I got an interview. It was my first real interview, because the other things I had interviewed for were like freelance stuff. They weren't like full-time things. And so I went for this interview, and I'm sitting there with a hiring manager, and he's telling me about the job, typical interview stuff. We're in an office. All of a sudden, a guy walks into the office, opens the door. He knocks, of course, comes in, and he's like, "So I hear you're a showgirl." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm in Jubilee. I'm one of the lead dancers." He's like, "Oh, so what's it like?" And I'm just like, "It's fun. I love it." Little small talk, whatever. I don't even remember all the things of the second interview I was in. And he did introduce himself to me as one of the owners of the agency. If you've ever seen Mad Men, he was Roger Sterling. That was this man. He was totally Roger Sterling. He wore, not in the 50s, of course, he wore aloha shirts every day.
Oh,
Hawaiian shirt.
really?
Every day to work.
Okay.
Yeah, he was definitely more of the...
I guess that was just after the 90s,
Yes.
where everything was casual in the office. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they had some very big accounts there, this ad agency. And so he said, "Okay, great, nice to meet you," and then just walked out as quickly as he came in. It was just like, okay. And the hiring manager looked at me, he said, "You know you're going to get this job just because you're a showgirl, right?" I was like, "Fine by me."
So be it.
And I did. I got it. I was a production artist at Shather Kramer Group Advertising for a couple of years. I actually quit dancing while I was doing that because dancing full-time and working full-time, when the show gets done at 12:10, the show finished, final curtain came down, I would run downstairs, take my face off, jump in the car, run to the car, jump in the car, go home and go to bed. After a show, how you're not, yeah. So get to sleep maybe by 2. Got to be at work by 7:30 so I can leave by 4:30 to work. Yeah, so it was rough. It was but I was young and I could do it. So that's my juicy bit for today's episode about hoeing your own road.
You make me think about, I was on a different track in my brain, but I interrupted my own brain because I think it's worth addressing how taxing a show can be.
Yes.
It's difficult to explain. This is something that certainly could fit in with our love and family episode and some of the things that were brought up there, in that a non-performer does not have any of the experience data to understand how taxing a show can be.
Right.
They just can't wrap their heads around it, and it's understandable, but it's akin to something I've heard in my career when somebody learns what my rates are, and they're like, "Well, you're only working for an hour." Oh no.
Oh no.
No, I'm not only working for an hour. It's so much more than that. We don't have to go into that.
That's a whole
episode.
5 episodes.
But it's worth noting, and certainly related to our episode that is called Love and Family. But you made me think of all kinds of things just, hearing that story. That is a story that I've heard before. But something I don't think is that I did give heavy consideration to a more traditional life, in that I considered law enforcement as a career.
Oh.
I considered that for a little while, and
how old were you when that happened?
I'll explain myself.
Okay,
part
sorry.
of that was me reconciling how much I may have disappointed my parents with my choice, my path.
Okay.
And I reconsidered it, understanding a few things about my own psychology, and I also found an alternative that was satisfying, which I can get into. So had I made the decision to go into law enforcement, of course I would have to go back to school and get a few things done in order to qualify, and then go to the academy. And it was going to be a long path, but the alternative that I found was interestingly something that was also an education that I could apply to what I now do and have for the last 20 plus years full time. But I worked as a private investigator for a while, and you did know that.
Yes.
But having worked as a private investigator, especially before the internet was really a tool, gave me a lot of interesting life experience. It was satisfying, it was disappointing, all of those things, but I did learn a lot of tools that I still use.
Well, yeah, I think that's one thing I'm learning now, and that previous generations, so you're not quite a boomer. You are more of a Gen Xer, for sure. But I think previous generations really, and because we were brought up, he was brought up by the greatest generation or whatever. What's right before
My
the
parents?
boomers? Yeah.
No, they weren't that
They're
old.
early boomers?
Yeah.
Okay, so mine were later boomers. Mine were late 50s. Yeah, so that generation was like, you get a job and you go the whole way till you retire. Like, and well, retirement only came about in the 80s anyway, having that plan set up and all of that. But they were like, you pick something and you stick with it. And I'm like, really? Like, I picked what I was gonna do, and I was 14 years old. Now that's what you do when you want to be a professional dancer. You have to start early. But very few people, you are one exception, but very few people know what they're going to do for the rest of their life any earlier than, I would say, 25. Like, how are people supposed to choose these things?
How many people, when they get into college, how many people change their
yes
their
well,
course
and what
of
sucks,
study?
I when I was driving for Lyft, I found out I had a lot of service people in my car, and they threw away their degrees because they were forced to choose one, and you cannot switch. Mm-hmm. And that's like the worst part. It's like, you don't even know who you are at that age.
Right.
It's just
Right.
It's incredibly.
You think you do, though.
Frustrating.
That's the problem. So you can't, and nobody's going to listen to you, especially a person that age.
Yeah.
That we all heard it when we were that age.
Yes.
People who are that age now, we can talk to them, we can try to reason with them. They're not going to listen.
Yeah.
It's part of it, I guess. But yeah, I'm neither one of us are knocking conventional or traditional. I feel like conventional is insulting at that point. It's not meant to be insulting. It's just that there are certain brains and hearts that require something different out of life, and
Right. Well, that's why I wanted to kind of talk about the skills that you've acquired. You acquired a huge toolbox. Like, there's like a couple of warehouses of tools that you have that you can pull from. I have a few tackle boxes.
oh no, you're
No, I do have a lot of skills and things that I've learned along the way. You know, I'm an awesome muffler
there are
maker.
transferable skills
Absolutely.
in virtually any life experience, I suppose,
Yeah.
and relationships that we've had, whether they persist or not. We glean some useful
Absolutely.
information.
Ugh. Who wants to go through those again? No.
No, but
At least
they had
that's
their
how
value.
I am. Well, I know, but there are people that repeat relationships over and over and over again. And
Well,
I just
yes.
prefer to learn the lessons and just move on. Okay, next.
Totally.
No, but I was going to say, because I think that there is a stigma in our society that performers are less than, for whatever reason. And I'm just going to say our society, I grew up in America, I am an American, and suburban America, no less, have certain things that have been drilled into me because of the way our society works here. And the arts are not valued as much as, say, sports.
It's interesting because the odds of making it
Oh God,
are more brutal in sports. So to encourage somebody to, also not knocking this, I have friends who are professional athletes, but being so supportive of a potential professional athlete, and then encountering an artist who has promise and being like, well, you better have something to fall back on. What are you going to fall back on? I don't know how many times I heard that growing up, and that was, certainly from my own family. They were supportive, but my father, his very words I can remember were that you have to start out mopping the floor before you can plan to own the building, and he was really staunchly of that mindset that you work your way up in a rank, and you go for the promotion, and
it's not working that way anymore.
I don't function that way. I never have. So that was kind of part of what caused the rift in our relationship, I suppose. But definitely hoed my own road when it comes to this alternative that we're talking about. That
right.
Again, not knocking it.
No.
It works very well for many people. And in fact, in the Love and Family episode, I talked about a very famous person in the legal world who is astoundingly wealthy. And so certainly tradition worked in favor of that person.
Yeah. And that's the legal realm, as I learned, because they were that law school was a client, and I learned just how much tradition is. This is how it goes. So when you watch the movie On the Basis of Sex, and I watched it from my perspective as a woman, but also knowing how traditional the legal field is, like, oh, she pushed hard, and she was able to hoe her own road in her way too. So this whole thing is not knocking.
Okay, I worry about that, but
I don't feel like it is. I hope you don't feel like it is.
I think that some of the qualities that we're talking about are, and you just brought it up yourself, are how even in a traditional path, traditional trajectory, say that 3 times fast, you kind of have to have that spirit about you anyway, that kind of willing to gamble. In order to be as successful as the people we're talking about, you have to have a little more adventure about your approach, even within the confines of tradition.
Okay. Absolutely. Okay.
But you have to take a risk
Agreed.
now and then, or you're not going to, be launched into that completely different tax bracket.
True. So what I'm learning about life in general and everything is on a dial. I put everything on a dial. And for performers, being a performer, it's a high-risk career. But that's not the only high-risk career out there, and I wouldn't call it a career either. It's not a career. Being a performer is not a career. I think it's like a lifestyle. And I'll say that because I feel like it parallels entrepreneurship. In your case, absolutely it does, because you have to be an entrepreneur in order to keep working. Whereas I, as a performer, had a 401k, I had a weekly paycheck, and that was my salary to perform the shows. That's not the case so much anymore. I think that Bally's was paying my paychecks, or when it was Hilton, it was all the things, but Bally's was paying my paychecks for 5 years. That was my thing, and I had the 401k, the 100% match up to 4%, all of the benefits. That's not a typical performer job. So I didn't have that entrepreneurial, I've always had the entrepreneurial spirit because of my parents. They had their dance studio, they had the costume shop, they had the comic toy shop. I've always been around entrepreneurs. But you took, like you said, you took risks. I took risks. And that's I think the biggest thing for anything is taking risks. But there's a lot of other skills from hoeing your own road. Whether you're...
Some of them have to be learned in order to...
Skill.
So, and it is skill. I'm recognizing the delicate balance that has to be achieved in order to be successful as a performer. You can't be too academic and formulaic about your approach because, in my opinion, it steals from your art.
Yeah.
And I know performers, and I'm doing this for a reason, who are, it's a business, and it's strictly business. And I think that their art suffers from that. They are not delivering as much value in their performance, if that makes any sense. And this could be an entire episode.
To me. Yeah.
But then there are the more artsy, aloof types who don't have the mind or stomach for the business part, and we lose a lot of amazing talent to the fact that it's hard. This is hard work.
Yeah, but the hard work is not the being a performer. The
No,
hard
it's
work is finding the work.
Bookkeeping and being
basic, like business admin. So
I struggle on that side.
You don't. You think you do.
When you have no money, it's easy to count. Yeah.
See, we're gonna do a money boot camp, you and me.
I know.
One of these
yes.
days.
So, you know what I'm getting at is that we've lost potential performers from teetering off of this balance being one side or the other, and so there kind of has to be not just a dedication, not just a lifestyle, but a interesting to achieve balance that kind of sorts. I don't know.
Don't ever do that gesture in public.
Me. No, that's funny. You stole that from my show. I think you know what I'm getting at. It's interesting, and that might merit a discussion all on its own. Is who makes it through all of these societal filters and barriers and challenges and
Well, I think that I'm going to try to wrap this up if that's all right.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to what people value. So when we're brought up, our parents try to teach us their values, and as we live life, we realize we don't value the same things they do. And it's mostly because of the way they brought us up. So family is one of my parents' strongest values, and it is actually not mine. Even though I do spend a lot of time with my family, I have structured my life around this family unit, right? The connection between me and my daughters, the connection between my love here, that's really important to me. And I will say no to certain work because it might take away from those things that I value so much. But as a performer, you also have to make those choices. I did a whole episode with my former dance partner, Andrew Roche, where we talked about art versus selling out. And you're talking about a certain performer who there's less art and it's more, some would say, selling out because they're following a formula or doing things very regimented, and there's no authenticity in art and flow and creativity, which we value very much in our family. Mm-hmm. Like, it's important, the authenticity, and then flowing it all together in a creative way.
If there's one thing that we agree on, it's authenticity is paramount.
Yes. Huge in our life, in our relationship, in our connections with the children.
Definitely not the last time you're going to hear the word
authenticity. You're probably going to get sick of it, but
it's so important.
Yeah, it really
that's my
really
soapbox.
Is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if I wrapped that up. All of these are going to be open-ended conversations.
They are open-ended, which is designed also to encourage you to send us comments or questions or observations, so that we can add to this conversation. We'll continue to have this conversation with each other and with you.
Yeah.
But I think that's a fine way to wrap it.
Yeah. Okay. I think so, except one thing. Why was it important to you to hoe your own road?
Proving to myself that I was able or capable.
Okay. Mine is not the same.
So you have to answer the question then.
Now I have to answer my own question. It's important to me to continue to hold my own road so that I don't lose myself as I had before. Yeah.
That makes sense. That's an episode 2.
Oh, I'm going to cry.
No.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Good one. Thanks, everybody.
We can't keep doing this without you. Give us just a little bit of your time by subscribing, sharing, rating, or talking about One Big Caper with someone else. We truly appreciate your support.
We want to hear your stories. Visit onebigcaper.com to get to know us even more.
This episode of One Big Caper was published in 2022. All rights to broadcast in whole or in part are the property of Gazelles Productions, LLC.